Aloha and Namaste on the second half of our first class on the Gunas of Prakriti and the Vrittis of Yoga. We have just spent a good 15 or 20 minute break talking about various things like Vedanta and science and practice, sadhana, and staying with the subject of the Dharma as we're wont to do, even in our so-called leisure time. So that really describes or indicates this ability to remain in a sattvic state, or you might say remain at attention to these dharmic teachings. Meditate with eyes open and eyes closed, as Holy Mother used to say. So that God doesn't just exist when we close our eyes in meditation and cease to exist when we open them, and also that God doesn't exist only when we're doing practice and cease to existence when we're not doing practice, but that when we're just sitting quietly and peacefully. So we see through the external and the internal to one indivisible state, and that becomes our sadhana. Practice sort of zeroes in on that one essence of being, if you want to say the becoming, was a part of the gunas that made it look like change was happening, particularly in our mind. I think thought and mind, and to words and to the deeds and the acts, kind of is a ladder of descension. And that's why Shankara says, Yatsa nyachatmani tam yacha buddhaudiyam yacha buddhi sakshini. You have to come to the intelligent witness, buddhi sakshini, by joining the word to the mind, to the intellect, to the ego. That's that small self that you want to ripen, and join that to the witness. Join the witness to the Atman, and the Atman to Brahman. So that's more rungs to your ladder, and that's a ladder of ascension rather than descension. So whether you're coming up or coming down, or you're evolving or involving, that these pathways have to be kept open. So that they're called nadis in yoga, inner passageways, and your thought runs along them, your prana runs along them, and your souls run along them, as long as you're doing a migrating process, like from heaven to earth to hell. Or in our tradition, from one loka to another loka, 3 worlds to the upper 4 worlds. Hopefully you can find a beautiful medium to that. The heart chakra with the 3 above and the 3 below is how Kundalini Yoga speaks about that. And we know that in Sri Ramakrishna's estimation, he being, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest and maybe the only notable teacher of Kundalini Yoga in this day and age, so he was back in the 1800s, has mentioned that there would be no spiritual growth without awakening Kundalini. So that primordial power which returns the migrating soul to its source, as we chanted out of the Yoga Sutras, Chitti Shakti called her, or the mother of the Buddhas, or however you want to name her, like in the poem we just had in the last chart, Tara, Tara, Taras. Chant the name of Tara, 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 and unmoor the bindings that attach you to the harbor of mundane human existence. That was all put by our founder, Lex Sixon, in his beautiful English translations of these Indian bhajans on poems that were done. Very expert at that, turning English into English mantras. So all of that can shed a light for us on these 3 gunas, which are at the very beginning of Prakriti's manifestation. That's how everything gets moving, gets rolling from the inside out, from the inception to conception, and then to deception and back. So we want to make sure that we're the witness of this process is all. That would be our first, like Tulsidas said in his song, he sang in the first half. If you can just cause my mind to quit perceiving duality, I'll be fine. But I seem to have this penchant for it. It's rather natural to the process, called dual mind. Manas is called dual by nature. The twos are just in it. And until the witness is trained to look away from the dualities towards something more unified through qualified non-dualism, and then finally, I am that, or that thou art, or I and my Father are one, to this non-dual position, it will find that it's beginning to transcend the gunas, and its use for them and its need for them. Maybe I should put that in the opposite order. Its need for them, and then its use for them. The gunas, just like the ego, will be necessary for the illumined soul to return to the embodied state, but of course not going to be dragged from birth to death and death to birth, as Vivekananda says. Dragged from birth to death and death to birth the soul. So it will come as the master of the gunas, Trigunatitananda, as one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna was named. And the thought processes will have been connected to the gunas as we're studying right now. So let's go on with that so we make some more headway here. We were looking at this, and I wanted to explain to you what was beyond sattva, called pure sattva or sattva shuddha. And we looked at that, all the things that a person with extra time on their hand, if you want to put it that way, will turn to do. They'll want to do sadhana more, and they'll want to have less and less to do with quotidian, commonplace, workplace, average thoughts, pleasures, worldly things, habits, preoccupations, samskaras, karmas. They're pretty much saying, get thee behind me to all that. And they're beginning to sharpen their intellect so that it can pierce through appearances. And they're beginning to turn the dual mind non-dual with its Dharma teachings and jnanam. Ripen the ego so that it won't be in the way anymore, trip over its own feet. And make the thoughts buoyant. Should we go back to the hot air balloon and go through all that again? That's the fourfold mind I just stated right there, and what to do with it. Manas, buddhi, ahamkara, and chitta. So we'll look at the Chitta Vrittis soon. I have a chart on that. I was going to, because we keep wanting to get to this chart, and we haven't shown it for a while. The Chitta Vrittis of yoga, but I think it will go well next class alongside of the connections between the Vrittis and the gunas. So here, sorry to drop us down to the darkest, deepest depths, but you see tamas there is tundra. Vedas, Father Vedanta, when he commented on Yoga's sutras of Patanjali, he talked about tundra and tundra misra, and basically he classed the 5 kleshas as 5 hells. Fear of death, clinging to life being the 5th and lowest hell. It's like the soul has fallen so low that it fears death when it was never born. That doesn't make sense here. Or it clings to life when life has been shown to be meaningless next to eternal life. That's called the 5th and lowest of all hells, abhinivesha. So he took the 5 kleshas of yoga and gave them this tundra classification. So this is why I use it here. Darkness and sleep. No light gets in there, ever, to these sleepy souls, to quote Vivekananda. No light ever visits a great little study of their life. And they never think of anything outside begetting and enjoying. They haven't been what we've been through in India. The Westerners haven't, they're drunk on new wine, he said. But we've long ago given up wine, and we know that it's all suffering, this world of Maya. And we've gone beyond it. Basically, I wasn't going to offer this yet, but it has to do with going beyond darkness. Dakshina smatina sakaruna jalpanti mudajana Nastikyantvi dantu aha devatva vadaturaha Praptaha shmaviragatabhaya abhayam pratistam yada Astikyan tvidantu chinumana Rama Krishna dasavayam. We will crush the stars to atoms. We will unhinge the universe. Don't you know who we are? We are the servants of Sri Ramakrishna. It is only the foolish, attached to their bodies, who piteously cry, we are weak, we are lowly. All this is atheism. Now that we have attained the state beyond fear, we will abide in our immortal nature forever and become heroes. Drinking the essence of immortality, renouncing attachment to the world, forsaking that self-serving spirit which is the mother of all dissension, and meditating on the blessed feet of our Guru, which are the embodiment of all well-being, we invite the entire world to share in this nectar. That nectar, which has been obtained by churning the ocean of the Vedas, into which Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva have poured their life essence, which is fortified by the avatars, God incarnate in human flesh, Sri Ramakrishna holds that nectar within him in fullest measure. That's the whole translation. We usually get only as far as we will crush the stars to atoms and unhinge the universe. Okay, that's all I can take. So let me work on that. But here's the rest of it, called abhaya pratistam, a state of fearlessness. Abhaya, as Mother tells you with one of her hands, pratistam, be steady in that. And so made me think about that when I think about strike off thy fetters, bondage, which comes next. You can see here that Tandra Mishra is ignorance about what? About your prana, because your prana is going to be necessary to straighten out its jagged edges, through breathing, through better food. All those things are lower teachings, but they're important. So your prana, you need to become aware of that. How to breathe, for instance, is in Buddhism and Hinduism both, you need to breathe. And just watch it and see how much better you feel. See how the guna of your mind changes just like that when you breathe, isn't it? Whether it's, I'm really restless, I'm angry, I'm confused, well, just settle down and breathe. Don't you feel better? Oh, that's better. A few minutes later. Or whether you're dark and depressed, and come on, sit up, breathe with me. Okay. See, oh yeah, I do feel better. So your vital energy is something you're going to need to become aware of to defeat tamas. That alone, I think, for today's day and age is a very valuable teaching for people at the beginning level of spiritual practice. You don't want to get obsessed with hatha positions and breathing exercises. You hear Shankara talk about that. It sounds like he's almost looking down his nose at it. But he also commented on the Yoga Sutras, in which asana and pranayama is contained in the 8 limbs. It's just that there are 6 other limbs we've got to be thinking about here, folks. We don't want to just reduce it to 2 or 1 physical again. This is quite the tendency, as we were talking about at the break. Also, you must become aware of selflessness, because when people are depressed and they come to us, Dharma teachers or gurus and acharyas and things, we say, well, try and do something for someone else. It's just like a swift punch you pull on them when they're not looking. See, I never thought about that. You're just so involved in yourself, tamas, right? Rajas too, as we saw from the sandbags, tends more in that direction, tends to pile more gloom on gloom. So basically we'll try doing something for someone else. Oh, I never thought of that, and you immediately feel better. Higher intelligence, you have to become aware of that. Buddhi sakshini, we were just the intelligent witness of the whole process. If you can think in that direction, you feel your hot air balloon casting off its moorings already. And become aware of the soul, the true self. That would be very good news to a person who's depressed about the world, about disease, about death of a loved one, about emotionalism, you name it, the whole gamut that Maya is throwing at you that's making you depressed and tamasic and suicidal and confused, and that gets more into the rajas. But let's look across the board and see how those two things, it's turning into bhranti, delusion, which is one of those 6 passions. And on one side of that is fed by spriha, desire, and the other side, lokayatika, materialism. So this is the tamasic. I mean, you say probably you could have some pretty intelligent thinking minds who are going back and forth between these 3 a lot. And, their rajas is our sattva. You see, our sattva, which means balance of mind, is their restless intellect. They're happy there if they're discovering something or inventing something to put their name on or kill someone with. It's pretty much running the gamut of these things. So what's the tamo rajas relates to what? Pleasure seeking. On one side of that is distraction, vikshepa. We know about that power of distraction. And then alpadika, sense enjoyment, on the other. This is kind of the territory of tamo rajas. And we're not just saying this as a negative teaching, we're saying this as a ladder. I mean, these are things that help you get out of the last rung. And people are probably doing this every 24 hours. In fact, we used to give the teaching out, watch your mind, like Holy Mother said, inside of an hour as you meditate. Oh man, I wish I could stand up and walk away. That's chanchala vritti, that's restlessness. Your mind's trying to tell you, this is no fun. You're not going to get anywhere. Why are you doing this? It's pointless. And then you fall asleep. You see, and be careful you don't face plant. You see, or you can see it. I'm practicing bowing. You see, meditators who do this a lot. So, but then sattva will come during your meditation. You see, you'll just be, your knees won't hurt, your spine is perfect. Swami Vivekananda said, just envision that you have these lines coming out of the air with hooks on them, and they're hooking to your rib cage. And guess what's at the top of those lines? Hot air balloons, helium balloons, because they rise. So they're taking your rib cage up. You see, so if you have this slumping problem, or you just bring. It's why you breathe too. You can actually think of a pain in your body, concentrate your mind on that pain, breathe, and do away with it. That's a fact. A yogi can do that. You can flex your muscle around that pain. Breathe, think about it, let it go. Oh, it's not there anymore. So people become helpless under the gunas, helpless to help themselves. And Rajas doesn't help that much because it confuses you about whether I can do this or not. I don't want to forget Swamiji's sayings. Under tamas was, let each one work out his or her own freedom. So if you got tamas, get busy. They were talking about that at the break. Maybe God's grace isn't coming because you haven't put your kite up to catch the wind yet. If you just put your kite up on a windless day, you'll find out that there's a great wind of God's grace blowing up there. All you needed to do was break out of your tamas and do something to receive that. And that's a great aid to most people at the beginning, intermediate level. If they know they can do that through their own willpower, they don't need to bother God about things. That's a God blog I'm going to probably do next week, is that the three men met a tiger in the woods. Remember that teaching by Sri Ramakrishna? One of them said, all is lost. It's about here, you see. All is lost. That's it. Game over. I'm dead. This is going to be painful too. That's the mother cat, with her claws out, big time. So the other one said, no, let's pray to God. Do you think maybe that's the wiser of the three? Well, that's probably up here somewhere, you see. The third one said, I think I'll climb a tree. Bye, guys. So he's not going to bother God for something so menial as his life or a tiger, when he just has the solution right in front of him. So this is what we mean by helping yourself. When you think everything's dark and gloomy, it really doesn't take but a breath or two or three, or a change of perspective, or taking refuge in a higher guna, if you want to think of it that way. The three gunas are a particular teaching in Samkhya Yoga Vedanta, all the way from Lord Kapila. The three gunas were mentioned in the earliest Samkhya scripture, the only one we have left in existence, really, the Tattva Samasta Sutras. Basically, there it is. There are the three gunas, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. So you don't find that in any other religion anywhere. Like I say, and in contemporary times you find moods, but not modes. Moods are with the psychologists, right? Psychiatrists. You do some work with your moods here, try and get a better mood going. But they're not connecting this to the cosmic process through your thoughts. The emotional body is involved, and where is that? Oh, it's in your heart? No, it's not true in Vedanta. The heart is the Atman. Emotions are here. Let's get this straight. And then we got to work on it here and leave this pure as our foundation. As I said, heart chakra, 3 below, 3 above. That's your center, your heart. That's love for God right there. You don't get out of the heavens. That is, if you have a problem with the heaven-seeking senses, until you've awakened to the heart. Then you can transcend heaven. So it's a whole different orientation on conventional than what conventional religion gives you. And if you have the gunas in your mind as a cosmic principle coming out of Prakriti, and you know where to assign it to, and you know that it's insinuating itself, their selves, on your mind, then you can do something about it. Otherwise, it's a mood that comes and goes, and here, have a pill, take a shot, or go on a vacation, go to a movie. But if you want to get rid of it for all times, you transcend it. And that's what we're doing here. So the quote here under Tamo Rajas, Swamiji, these are all his one-line quotes. Advancement towards liberation is freedom, the worthiest gain for mankind. Freedom is the worthiest of all gains for mankind. Freedom from bondage, which you are right now suffering in Tamo Rajas. You're really aware more of suffering here. Let's look at that. Relating to kamana, pleasure-seeking, we said that. So it's about the sense objects, pleasure with its pain, excitement, family, pastimes, feelings, and broodings. It's not like in the Rig Veda where it said, God brooded and swelled with joy, Rig Veda says. So it brooded on everything possible in Prakriti. It swelled with joy and said, this will happen. The light will be here. The darkness was, now it's the light. That's a good kind of brooding talk about there, when Brahman does it, in that ability to expand and to play. Like I was telling a student today, coming to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, reading along, you've gone a few chapters, and all of a sudden this is a great soul. All of a sudden you think, my most mature opinion is, what was that? See, this is right out of the Gospel. So I sat up and paid attention right away, you see. My most mature opinion is what? What's his most mature opinion? That a man starts at the nitya, descends to the lila, and goes back to the nitya. It's right there in the gospel. My most mature opinion for this whole situation we're in. Starts with the nitya, the eternal. He is the eternal. Comes down and plays a little bit when God broods and swells with joy, and then goes back to the nitya. Notice how he didn't say anything about falling into the maya. He's like, maybe he came down this far. And this was just not worthy, not noble. So one then maybe loses a little of his amazement for the mind quality of those souls, because they don't really see suffering. And so when they see you suffering, they say, what's this about? What's going on here? I don't understand. They don't understand ignorance, suffering, misery, attachment. They don't understand those things. They're not necessary. Remember I told you in the first half, 3 kinds of suffering? There's that suffering that's just not necessary. If you want to try and remove the suffering of the world, which is like the mantra of some of the Buddhist schools, do it there, because you're not going to get rid of the suffering that has to do with dual mind, unless you transcend it, and collective mind, and you're not going to get rid of the sufferings that are part of the transmigration process. 6 billows. Sadurmi, it's called in Sanskrit. Those are there to stay. As long as you're in a body, that's it. You can't levitate around above those on the physical world. Yeah, yogic hopping, they call that. So all of these things for Tamil Rajas have to do with bondage, or bandha. How about the next Rajas pure? Contradiction in terms, but Marisa is the word. It's pretense and vanity, like those hot air balloons. People are running toward I, me, mine. And they've been loosed from the prison house of lunatics, to quote Vivekananda. Prison house of lunatics. The doors were thrown wide open. Thomas was, get thee behind me, and they think, I can do anything now. That's one of the 5 kinds of actions that Sri Krishna mentions in the Gita, if you look into it. In fact, I have a chart, maybe I can show you next week about that. It's that I will do, I will gain, I will attain. These are all earmarks of the ego in Rajas. Notice how they disappear in Sattva. I don't do anything. It's either my own karma that's doing it, or it's the Lord. And that's out of the Akshi Upanishad, if you remember. Beautiful sloka there. I've learned to see everything as either a product of my own karma, so that I'm taking responsibility for that, or it's the grace of the Lord. Beautiful. The sun god made this beautiful conclusion for Samkriti, the rishi who had gone to see him. Samkriti. Very unknown yogi, except for that Upanishad. So Marisa, pretense and vanity, is it really that easy to just assign that to Rajas? Because Rajas could be so many other things, but you can see here that it's all about deception. I am the doer, deception, and called kapata. And emotionalism is on one side of that. If I don't attain, I'm going to get angry, sad, depressed, I'll fall back into tamas. And on the other side of it is udasina, indifference. You see, not necessarily the indifference of a non-dualist, which is a good thing, but the indifference meaning I've had my hand slapped and I'm not so likely to put it in the fire anymore. That's beginning to let some light into the equation. Disappointment at that level can lead back to tamas, but it can lead to sattva if you have some abilities in you. If you have some practice, like mantra. So you can see it's around false attainment, assumed status, feigned authority and sense of superiority, rajas really kicks in at that level. So it really is much about this pretentiousness of the soul, who is fastening on the ego and it's the world's attainments. And that's going to be very hard for most people to let go of. Things like self-surrender are enjoined from the seers as a practice. Sharanagati. You must surrender to a higher power, to your higher self, if you want to think of it that way, if you can. But like the Triple Gem, Guru, Dharma, Sangha teachings and all that, if you can make the jump into that, well, we already looked back and saw that that was sattva, basically. They're beginning to practice. They're beginning to get holy company. They got a mantra. And they're beginning to be released from this whole level, like 3 lower chakras. Then we step up to Rajasattva. Things are getting better now. And spiritual awakening. That's what we would like to see for more people. The great doubt in Zen, again, one of the 3 pillars of Zen, would be one of the ways in which traditional Japanese Zen, coming from China and from India before that, over 52 generations, has given us that wish that all beings awaken and be free. A beautiful song in India about that my mind is going to right now, basically saying, a man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. Now all my dreams have been turned into radiant meditations. Now my only desire is to assay the gold of consciousness, and with that gold build a temple to humanity in which to worship. I will clear the jungle of my mind 1 acre at a time and build this golden temple with my own pure consciousness and invite all beings to come and meditate there. So the desire comes forward to help all people. That's where selfishness was. Selflessness is beginning to take its place. And Vivekananda, I just saw that on a daily calendar last week. It said, selfishness is a sign of ignorance, and selflessness is a sign of spiritual awakening. The more selfish you become, the more towards hell, Tan Mishra, you head. And the more selfless you become, the more towards the higher heavens and beyond is your direction. So this brings up some of the more beautiful words in Sanskrit. It ushers in sadhana, self-effort. I need to purify myself. I need to polish the pot, because the tarnish is coming in the humid climate of the world is tarnishing my pot. I take my mind and I rub it, till it shines. Then I can offer it back to the deity. And on one side of that, beings begin to think more deeply. Alochana is a beautiful word. Alochana. And on the other side of it is attainment, adhigama. So this happens the other side of this is upalabdhi, perception. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So those 3 things having to do with spiritual awakening, who wouldn't want to awaken spiritually? O mind, awaken, you must, is another beautiful song in India. It's this beautiful way of putting it. Rise up the gunas, as the mind is doing every series of breaths, every hour meditation, every year of your life, every 12 years of a cycle. A larger gunic cycle, they say, is like 12 years, or every lifetime, every 80 to 100 years, should you live so long, in perfect health, as they say. You rise up the gunas. Back here at Rajasattva, before we leave it behind, Vivekananda says at that level, may you speedily attain to freedom and then help others to attain it. Because it's the worthiest gain. And under Rajas, going back here, He says, those social rules that stand in the way of freedom are injurious. They should be gotten rid of. So this is a radical person, and America tends to love radicals, so we should really love Swami Vivekananda for this radical stand on bondage and freedom that he takes, and his accent of non-duality, and getting rid of ignorance with it, stepping up, because these happen to go side by side with a lot of thinking. Remember, we're going to be connecting that next week more. A lot of thinking and non-thinking and negative thinking, klista and aklista, is going into all these things. People are being born with that kind of thought process and passing away with that kind of thought process. So remember to include this in your own thinking process when you take this dharmic teaching. At sattva level, it's called mumukshutvam. Actually, we didn't finish Rajasattva. Glimmerings of insight, intuition, aspiration, willingness, positivity, those are all earmarks of spiritual awakening. If you see a person, Sri Ramakrishna said, who has those qualities, you know that that person is, his or her lifetime is now very auspicious. They're showing signs of that kind of awakening. Now we just hope and pray they'll stay with that, like Holy Mother says, that these even burnt ropes or past habits or samskaras or winds of samskaras will not come back on them and blow that balloon off course. And yes, we did read the quote under that. So at the sattva level, and you see in parens here, pure sattva, that's why I showed you the quote of the three fencers last time. So you'd already know where the gunic process is concluding, where trigunatita is actually possible or probable, definitely preferable to the freedom-loving soul. At the level of sattva, we'd probably put that word mumukshutvam, because you have one single desire to be free now, not a bunch of little experiences that happened here that told you in your still confused mind, sure you don't want to be free? What will it take? Well, this much work. No, I don't think I want to be free. Or down here, it wasn't even an option. You were just bound in darkness. So mumukshutvam, true desire to be free, involving what? Prasana. I know people in India who are named that word. That means clarity of mind. So their parents want them to have that so much, they gave them the name. We'll just call you clarity of mind. Hey, clarity of mind, come over here. Have some clear mind soup at dinner. So they want to remind you at every turn possible, every juncture of your life, that this is what you should be attaining or have had already attained, or will go into your next life attaining and come back having attained. That was back here with Adhigama, right? That's true attainment. Something you can rest on, like bedrock instead of sand, something that you have for your own, that no one can take away from you. When I was a child, I was attached to childish things. Now I'm a man and I've given up childish things, Jesus told the apostles. I just heard that said, I'm paraphrasing it, I heard it said just yesterday. And when you become grown up, you give up these childish things. So these things all fall away, and they were unreal. Well, that's a quick sword stroke from Vedanta, neti neti and all that. But if you have to prove yourself by taking up a teaching like the Gunas and watching your mind day to day until your mind, like a hot air balloon, can just stay where you put it, at the heights, whether it be witness consciousness or having a desire that's so pure that you'll actually begin to get that pearl of great price that you've only heard about up to that point, and that which is about to happen to you and make you breathless. You won't have to practice breathing exercises anymore. You're breathless at that point. That's called kumbhaka. You're stunned. Sri Ramakrishna says, like, I just shot a gun. Pow! Your first time. You're stunned, you know. And he gave other analogies to that state. You just heard a loved one died, stunned. You see, one of your relatives passed away. Your best friend's getting married, stunned. And not for just the usual reasons either, quite often. So this desire to be free involves clarity of mind. One side of it is gaining this attainment. The other side of it is niskampana, stability. These are some real beautiful Sanskrit words from there on up. I like them very much. Alochana. I mean, I entertain them in my mind. If I ever just want to fix my mind on something dharmic or in the Atmagyan, I just have to think that word in Sanskrit, and it just inspires me. And I've become convinced by doing that that's what gives seers bliss, is splitting apart atoms, particles of a word, and finding intelligence in it and bliss inside. You know, the word can just put them. So it may be the most powerful weapon for war, words, negative words, and programming, proselytization, all those things that words do in politics and in religion, irreligion. But it's also the most powerful thing against ignorance, is words. And you can put death in its own grave, make fear afraid of itself by words. The Vakdevi, she will bear me out on that. So you just go talk to her, okay? Go talk to the Vakdevi and see if Babaji was right about words. Well, it's sattva's really recognition of oneness of yourself. That might not be fully developed yet till pure sattva is coming, but you're getting there. That's where viveka, discrimination, with its neti process, adhyaropa, apavada, and vairagyum, all come in there. That's where you can really have those Vedantic tools and make them effective, if you have attained sattva and you can hold it. You can attain it for a while, then it's going to work at the time that you're having sattva, but not after. That's the problem. You do some work, sadhana, and you get rid of some of your karmas, but the rest come dancing forward because sattva goes away, and now you can't wield those tools of Vedanta in sattva anymore. So you have to wait for the next cycle of sattva to come around to do your work. That's no good. So you want to attain that peace that passes all understanding, that eternal stability, that bedrock that you're building your house on, uninterrupted and unalloyed, as they say. Detachment, willingness to practice, that's one of the earmarks, I think probably for most of us in this day and age, is one of the earmarks of sattva and pure sattva. I have a willingness to go sit down, so I'll advise my students that in the midst of everyday life, make sure that you pick up scriptures every day for a while. Make sure you meditate every day. Make sure you offer a flower to the mother on the altar and some incense every day, even if you don't feel like it, because you're offsetting Maya every time you do that. The Maya that's wanting to come in like green scum and cover the lake of your mind and send you back toward the lower gunas again. That's not allowable. Sorry. I do not accept that. I think I do not accept that became one of my mantras when I was in my 20s, because my teacher said it with such force whenever he heard nonsense from anyone or any religion or anyone who thought they knew what they were saying. I do not accept that. He's just so sure that he had the truth, and people were going to have to listen to that truth. Unimpeachable is the word. And if it's realized, like in a Vivekananda, I mean, who can say anything? Nobody could when he was around. Even peoples of other religion were just like, oh, let's see, that makes sense, but it's not what it says in the Bible. I better go back and change my wording. He said he saw that happening after he gave out the Advaita truth to people who were teaching sin, damnation, and so forth. You know, the jig's up. The ruse is over. I cannot make my living this way anymore. The truth has been uncovered. Who can veil the truth? Who can keep a burning fire tied in a cotton cloth? The Song of India says. That reaches to the end of this chart, except that at the top there, moksha. Nice to put, instead of just freedom, which infers that I was once bound, perpetual freedom. I was always free. It's just a state always at hand. That's the nature of my Atman. The nature of my mind was different. That's why I said neti neti to it all along. I said neti neti to my ego when I saw it. I said it to my thoughts when I saw them. I said it to my intelligence before it was honed and sharpened. And I'm going to say it to my dual mind. That's why I'm going to pray to Ram tonight. Please cause my mind to quit thinking about duality, as we sang. Help me, in this endeavor. And my mind will just soar like a bird to the protective cage of your lotus feet. Beautifully put by Tulsi Das. What was the quote under that? There must be freedom of the individual to express his nature. Well, that's where you feel that freedom at Sattva. You can express yourself without the weight of the gunas and the thinking process that went with it. The vrittis are refined. The old vrittis are over, the new vrittis are on the way. And things like freedom or pure sattva are in the offing now. And you can see across there, the only thing I could put next there was one of Swami Vivekananda's favorite Sanskrit words, samasti chitta. The thoughts, the chitta there has become universal. And its thinking is unbridled. The mind is just opened up. And you might call that transcendence of mind. If you're not talking about non-duality, immersion of the salt doll in the ocean yet, you're just talking about the highest state the human mind can attain, like to Ishvara. But you want to put it in terms of jnanam or philosophy, you're going to say the universal mind is wide open, all its avenues are open, and it's flowing constantly with Chitti Shakti. She's taking my mind all over the place. And the result of that, as I just said, like with thoughts and words, Ananda, bliss, right there on the top of the chart. That's what Ananda is. So, what's the Swami Vivekananda's final quote here? Liberation, freedom, mukti is all of religion. And everything that tries to curb it, I will avoid by flight or by fight. Freedom is the only condition of growth. Take that off, and the soul is degenerate, and the result is degeneration. That's how much he thought and loved the word freedom. And we think why he passed away on 4th of July, went into Mahasamadhi there to show us that freedom had much, much deeper ramifications than just political freedom, which based in here. See, you need higher thinkers to tell you how to think and how to act, or you just become like kids with fireworks at 4th of July. What can we blow up next? Who can we scare? Who can we blow up next as it fuses, burning and blowing up in your hand? You're courting disaster. What was that again then? We have about 10 minutes left. I think, let's look at this, the color-coded chart. No quote on it. It'll get filled up with this same thing over here, but this is where I put the gunas more than just in nature or in the mind. I also put it in serve it in activity. So you've got it in nature. We know that in nature, and you'll see that next week in that new chart, that it's just coming out of a seeming inertia and burgeoning in chaos, and then turning into some sort of balance. If you see the inception of nature, if it really has one, well, it does have an inception at the beginning of long cycles of time. It's just that the way we look at time in the West is both linear, that's aside for now, but we're not thinking of it as repeating itself like they do in India. That you just went through one cycle there, you know, of 1,320,000,000 years. You just went through one cycle. It's coming back again. That's how eternal the soul is. You see how you'd have to have a concept of time like that. You could only have it if you knew your soul was eternal, right? Or maybe if you were one of the three Trinity, you could have that view, like Lord Brahma. Oh, I have to get up again. Time to create, you know. I was sleeping so nicely, or Vishnu was sleeping so nicely on his bed of snakes on the ocean of Akarnava in the cosmic waters, but now, shoot, this guy came out of my navel, you see, called Brahma, and he's bothering me. He wants me to sustain what he's going to create, you know. And there are some demons that got into the picture, even at the cosmic level, like Kaitaba, who were pieces of earwax in Vishnu's ear when he was sleeping, fell into the ocean and became demons that threatened him when he came forth again in the next cycle. Oh, don't get me started. There's all the beautiful stories, the Itihasa of India, that have such great spiritual connotations. But back to the point is that in nature, the gunas come rushing out with inertia, chaos, and balance. You could pick other words, you know. You could just put, you know, blackness instead of inertia. I mean, inertia could actually be almost sattva. They look alike, right? Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. The person who's laying down there, sleeping, with a cloth over his head, you know, seems to be tamasic. But actually that's Swami Abhedananda there, or Swami Adbhutananda there. He's lying there with the cloth over him, but he heard everything you said for the last hour. You thought he was just a lazy, sleepy monk. But he pulls his cloth off and sits and said, yes, I heard everything you said. I just like to lay down and meditate sometimes in the middle of the day. So another person could be laying there just slobbering on himself, flies buzzing around his mouth. He's definitely in tamas. In fact, I've used that analogy before. A dog laying, slobbering on itself, flies buzzing around its mouth. That's tamas. The dog heading for the fire hydrant, that's rajas. And a dog sitting regally in the sun, like an Irish setter or a Labrador, just somehow balanced. You know, not breathing hard, not distracted by what it hears way off miles away with its fantastic ears. It's just like in sattva. And this is all happening in nature. Okay? Two different beings in nature. I got going too long on that, but that's the left-hand column. The middle column was the gunas in the mind and the gunas in activity. Let's start from the top this time. In nature, pure sattva perceives the unity of pure Purusha and Prakriti. That's kind of the conclusion of the seers, is that union means the two shall never meet as far as one being sentient and the other being insentient, you know, like oil and water not mixing, only apparently for a little while. But they're in the same bottle, right? I mean, and they do mix temporarily, which is a rhodastic kind of thing. But basically, you think of this mind being in stasis is another word that comes forward in science. It's just this eternal balance that's uninterrupted. It can't be interrupted. It's that deep peace of pure understanding. So when the person knows that the oneness of Purusha, that is the soul and nature, is because the Purusha gave rise to Prakriti. Remember, from the Nietzsche to the Lila and back to Nietzsche, I'm going to have somewhere to play if I'm going to play at all. So I'm going to make Leela possible with all the elements of nature. And I'll go there once and I'll give it up. See, I'll go back to my eternal self. So I just want to sport. Tantra loves this kind of analogy more than, it's all unreal. And non-duality is something, that is somehow offsetting the play and sport of consciousness, like it can't happen or it's just a dream. The world is real, God is real too, has been said by some great beings. But they make sure to quickly correct it philosophically, give the right impression by saying the world is only real if Brahmans are real first, one before the zeros. It won't happen the other way. If Brahman's not there and you think the world to be real, that's courting a lot of zeros. And that's a kind of emptiness you don't want to go to, like a voidism or nihilism. So what does pure sattva look like in the mind? Approaching attainment of God realization. What does it look like in activity? Serving God and all beings. That's pure sattva. We see that in all souls. What does sattva look like in nature? Living in harmony with it. Those beings who will sit all day and watch a flower bloom. Kind of cliche in Hinduism, right? But there's some very beautiful things there that you can notice if you sit a long time. Buddha did it for 48 days, evidently. Christ did it for many days in the wilderness. So there must be something really great about observing nature and then seeing its connection inside of you, as we just said above. Sattva to pure sattva. And what about in the mind? What does sattva look like? We looked at that already. Intense spiritual practice for gaining knowledge. What does it look like in activity? Performing all work free of selfish motive, which will be something you're going to have to purify or neutralize before you can serve God and all beings effectively. What does Rajasattva look like in nature? Mastery over it and utilizing its resources. The Purusha and the Prakriti. Prakriti is there to serve the Purusha. And so Purusha has to remain master. And when it does, then of course, if in activity it's all about seeing God in everything, then you're going to see it in nature too. Therefore, you'll respect nature. It's part of yourself, so why not? In the mind, Rajasattva looks like altruistic work for the good of society. Often I take this from the bottom up because it shows you how the maturation process happens. But since we're talking about Nietzsche to Lila, back to Nietzsche, we're doing it this way this time. So before sattva dawned, you were probably not doing everything selflessly for serving God, but you were in an altruistic mode. So you were thinking you could help the people of the world. And that's more of a Rajasattva kind of level. It's beneficial, but a little idealistic, maybe a little naive, as you begin to see the truth of the matter come through, particularly in terms of non-duality. But Rajasattva then in action is complacency after attaining wealth. So you can see how you're going to want to go to the sattvic level because people are going to be satisfied with a kind of sattva that's pink. You know who I'm quoting there, Swami Vivekananda. Oh, the Americans are pink right now, he said. So he meant that they've got a combination of red, rajas, and you might say yellow, sattva, or white, sattva. And it's not just aggressive red all the time, and it's not just pure sattva where they're beyond altruism and actually seeing God and everything, which is a much higher level. But they actually have a combination of those two things. So they're going to probably fall into this misconception that if you've got wealth, that you've reached success. And probably want to haven't yet reached that higher knowledge that will be wary of wealth, and as the sandbags of the air balloon showed us. Rajas, I think we're probably running out of time, but we could pick this up right there at Rajas next time. That would give us a good into maybe that new chart that I'm going to show you next week, plus its complement here, this beautiful chart that is brand new also, Sattva Guna, Transcending Reflections and Liberating Methods of Non-Duality, Advaita. So we'll start off with this next week, right in the middle. That will segue us into how gunas and vrittis are really more connected. I mean, you've seen how generally they are connected, but this will give you more of a chance to see how the gunas really affect our thoughts at negative, mixed, and positive levels. And it would be very helpful for us to see the world in that light. We'll be able to be more effective in helping others be of benefit, to be of benefit for others. As they say in the Upanishads, Om Bhadram Karnebihi, Shunyama Devaha, Bhadram Pashema, Akshabirya Jatraha, Stirai Rangayish Tushvansastonavir, Vishema Devahitam Yadayahu. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshiping the Lord and Mother with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi.